r/AskReddit. Redditors who made a lot of money by sheer randomness. What's your story? I won $5,000 playing bingo on a cruise. I have only been on one cruise, and it was the only time I have played bingo in my life. I have retired from both. Going out on top. The summer after my freshman year in college, I was walking my little 20-pound dog on a street near my house. A neighbor lady was walking her two dogs who were a husky and some other similar sized dog. The husky attacked my dog, and in the process I got some teeth marks on my wrist. Since the neighbor's dog started it, and the owner obviously couldn't control it, I wanted them to pay the vet fees for my dog, which was under $500. The guy ended up being a dick about it, and my roommate's dad was a lawyer, so about a year and a half later I ended up with about $20,000. There's a little bit of a justice boner in there somewhere. Be a decent person and pay $500. Be a dick and pay 40 times of that. That is what happened to McDonald's and the famous $3 million coffee suit. McDonald's was getting sued a lot and kept settling because that was their policy. People figured this out, so started suing for anything. Some executive decided to be a dick and said, okay, the next suit we are fighting no matter what. Lady buys coffee, it was actually extremely hot, she spills it, and gets third-degree burns. She asks McDonald's to pay for her hospital bill, which was something like $500. McDonald's says no and countersues. Bad move. Jury sees the pictures of the actual burns and finds out that it had happened before, and that McDonald's actually did serve their coffee very hot because it tastes better. Boom. $3 million instead of $500. The thing was, unlike many of the suits that were completely fraudulent, she actually was severely injured. They don't make the coffee that hot because it tastes better. They make it that hot so dining customers don't get free refills. They actually studied how long it takes an average customer to dine in and made their coffee so hot it took the entire time for it to cool to a drinkable temperature. Worked a job for a long time. Got hurt on the job. They, instead of helping me, terminated me. Got a lawyer. A year later got $260,000 for the whole fiasco. Not sure if this counts, but that's my story. How much was it after lawyer fees and taxes? They usually take a third before you get yours. Which is a bit fair because without them, you'd have $0 instead of $260,000. That's still $130,000. That goes to the lawyer for what? A year of work on that one case. I ask the above question out of ignorance of what sort of a salary a lawyer can have. It's a game of chance. If a lawyer doesn't win, they get $0 for a year's worth of work on a case. It's fair high upside when you factor in the downside of nothing for lots of work. I once got a message from Reddit admin. It asked if I wanted to do some contract work in my free time. Over the course of a few months, I made like $5,000 for browsing subreddits and categorizing them by topic and age rating. I didn't get to pick the subreddits I wanted to view though. They'd send me a list of a few hundred subreddits, and I'd have to spend about 10 to 15 minutes on each sub. I'd check for certain things, fill out a Google Sheets form, and move on to the next sub. When I finished a full list, I'd email them to get a new one. It was a pretty sweet gig. I was a substitute teacher and a tutor at the time. So anytime a kid or a teacher cancelled on me, I'd do my Reddit thing. Plus, it was an easy job to do while I was homesick or waiting for the repair guy to come to my house. Because I had no set hours, I just worked whenever I felt like it. So is this still an option or not? I feel like I could totally do this. Nah. They might do it again, I don't know. But the dude in charge of the program has to message you and set up an interview. Also, it was mind-numbingly boring. But yeah. You have to be sought out for it. They wouldn't accept people who heard about it and messaged them. I started an Amazon private label business on a whim in 2015. I made about 25% of the sale in profit after product, shipping, and advertising costs. Sales doubled every month for 6 months: June $4,000, July $8K, August $18K, September $40K, October $84K, November $175K, December $362,000. I didn't know what to do. I quit my job in January to focus on growing the business, but my time was spent mostly trying to fend off competition copying my listing and posting fraudulent reviews, and then lowering my price in the race to the bottom. It went well for a few years, but I never made as much as I made that first December. What kind of stuff did you sell, if you don't mind me asking? I've always wanted to try this. Sounds like it could be worth it. It could be worth it if you could get a time machine and go to 2014. I sold fogless shower mirrors and makeup mirrors. I found mirrors on Alibaba that weren't already on Amazon and made a ton. Now all those manufacturers just sell directly on Amazon and cut out us middlemen arbitrageurs. In the 90s I fostered a dog for some friends who were leaving town and left the dog with me. This dog immediately made an impression upon me, and even though I really didn't want a pet at the time, he was such an amazing dog, he convinced me otherwise. He was super smart, half black lab, half pit bull. I called him Wisdom because he was so smart. Fast forward a few years, I used him as a mascot for a recording studio I set up. I registered the domain name wisdom.com. My dog passed away several years later, and I was heartbroken and depressed for many years. I maintained the domain name, even though I didn't really have any projects associated with it. Over the years people made offers on the domain name, but I always passed. The domain was a homage to my long lost best friend. Then in 2000 with the .com boom, there was renewed interest in domains and IPOs. I had a few groups bugging me for the domain name and kept increasing their offers. Eventually the numbers got into the life-changing areas of money and I couldn't ignore them. I originally secured the wisdom.com domain name for nothing. In the early days of the internet, it didn't cost any money to register a domain name. You just had to fill out the right forms. I actually would never have to pay any domain renewal fees if it wasn't for a sysadmin that made changes to the domain and accepted new terms of service that forced me to have to pay renewal fees. Otherwise, the $475,000 I was ultimately offered in cash would have been pure profit. But instead my cost was a few $100s over the year. Still a significant windfall that gave me the opportunity to take that money and create another cool community of wonderful people. I continue to be in awe that my little dog, Wisdom, had the ability to bestow such an amazing gift upon me so many years later, and I'm determined to use that gift to help others. I took the money to create a special space that is a makerspace and club to help others. My wife's aunt died. She had been institutionalized her whole life and neither of us had ever even met her. We kind of forgot about it for a few months until my wife's uncle emailed her and said she was going to be getting some money. We were like, oh, okay, that's kinda weird, but not complaining. Then my wife got a phone call from the uncle one evening. I heard a lot of ums, okays, and geez, wows. Turned out we were getting over $300,000. We were both grinding away making $15 an hour and barely making rent every month, and then boom. Out of nowhere. That ended up being the difference between having a house and not having a house, being able to start a family and not being able to start a family, and having a retirement fund vs just hoping not to get evicted every month. Sounds like you made very good use of the money. Congrats on the unexpected windfall and using it wisely. I found $3,600 in a food takeout box in the middle of a giant field. I live in a rich area and lot of drug deals happen, so it's possible I stole multiple thousands of dollars from a drug dealer on accident. Someone is probably dead because of this, lol. I used to know a guy who bragged about the money he was making selling pot for a guy. Other guys broke into his house, stole the money and the unsold pot. He ended up leaving the state for a few years. I was the victim of housing discrimination and the morons put it in writing. They literally sent me an email explaining they wouldn't rent to me because of a legal discrimination reason. Had they just not sent the email, they would have been fine. Nobody would have known they'd rejected my application for a bad reason. It's okay to reject applications for a wide variety of reasons. If they'd chosen a fake one, or even given no explanation at all, they wouldn't have found themselves in legal trouble. I made a complaint to my state and the state assigned a free lawyer to handle it. I didn't even know they'd do that. Anyway, the people kept lying and saying I was making shit up. They insulted my character in a wide variety of ways that went way beyond the issue at hand. Think stuff like claiming I was faking, reason they discriminated in the first place, so how could they discriminate against something I was faking? It was just ridiculous. In the end, I wound up with a decent sized check. Again, when I reported them, I thought I'd never learn the result of what the state would decide to do. I was just reporting a broken law. But the best part was that the lawyer asked me if I wanted them to have to take an anti-discrimination class because, if I did, the state would include that in the punitive measures. I did. The class was 2 hours away from them in the constant traffic of our area, and I liked imagining them having to sit there in some ugly depressing room while being educated about why they were shitty people and needed to stop being shitty. That's uplifting to hear their comeuppance came so easily and quickly, and glad you were able to stick it to them. I was pretty shocked that it was taken so seriously and then handled so efficiently. My grandma decided to try a slot machine once as a joke and won $300 first try. Same but with my dad, and he won $24k, lol. I work in poke rooms. An elderly man once came in and asked me to teach him how to play. I did so, and about 20 minutes in he won the grand jackpot of around 9,000 Australian dollars. I was overjoyed for him and got really excited. Then for months I watched him come in regularly and just lose. I felt so bad that I had taught him how to play and that he won so big to start with because his bar was then set so high he could never live up to it again. Poor man won himself a gambling addiction. Playing blackjack while drunk in Reno. I had $300 to waste at the $5 table, got lots of free watered down drinks while I was playing, so I wasn't paying attention. I have a rule, 2 piles, one of cash I can waste and another of money I won. I was there for about 3 hours before I realized I wasn't out of betting money and the dealer had changed 4 times. Won $4,000 at that table. Paid for the trip and a bit left over. I haven't been to a casino since, but I doubt I'll have that kind of luck again. I've played 1 spin of roulette in my life. Put $40 on 17 in Cayman. Dang, $1,400 is a nice 20-second payday. When I was 17 about to turn 18, my mom told me to open a bank account because I was going to get around $500 to $600 from my dad. Opened the bank account, signed the papers she needed me to, and got a whopping $15,400 deposited into my bank at 18 years old. 2 years ago, 22 at this point, come to find out he gets a huge settlement for a car accident, I think, and get another $15k disbursed over 2.5 years. I don't know if it was back child support or what, but I was really blessed. I used to play Minesweeper a lot. Some website showed up where you could play in little tournaments. I started with $20 and made over $1,000. I have never won a game of that. Even in the easy mode. I like numbers. I just can't do Minesweeper. Meanwhile I had a friend who could rapid fire through expert mode. Wait, there's logic/skill to this? Pretty sure I would just guess and pray. Also the last time I played was probably 1998. The numbers on the squares tell you how many bombs are touching that square. So you can often figure out where is safe to place and where isn't. My friend's dad's friend decided to open an ice business. Hey, everyone need ice. He bought an old warehouse in the ghetto because it was cheap. Government decided to redo the on-ramps to the bridge and needed to buy like 1/3 of his parking lot, maybe say 20 parking spots worth. He didn't care, he had a staff of like 4, never used more than that. I never heard exact numbers, but I did hear he got more for those spots than he paid for the property. My great aunt and godmother was a lesbian. Her partner, my auntie Kitty, had been with her since the 1950s when my godmother moved to New York City to work for as a magazine photographer. Auntie Kitty was disowned by her family when it came out she was with a woman. My godmother died when I was 12 and left my auntie Kitty everything in her will, which made things strained with my dad's family, though my dad and one of his brothers still talked to her. I moved to New York at 18 for school, and, knowing no one else in the city, we became close. She was thrilled that I wanted to have a relationship with her and spend time with her, and didn't hesitate to think of her as my aunt, even though she technically wasn't. She was legit the greatest, and we spent holidays together, and she would come to things I worked on, and I knew all her friends and she knew mine. I basically spent a decade with her being like another grandmother to me. As she got older, she'd repeatedly remind me I was the executor of her will, that I was to follow it to a T, and none of her family was to get anything. I got the bulk, my dad and uncle got some, and my sister and my nieces a little. I knew the woman had money, she had a vacation home in the Carolinas and a brownstone in New York City, but since they were bought in the 70s, I figured outside of real estate, there wasn't much. I was very wrong, and inherited enough that potentially I wouldn't have to work ever again if I didn't feel like it. This is so sweet, she clearly loved having you in her life. My previous employer eliminated my position, a whole department actually. I got a severance of 1 week/year which worked out to be 22 weeks of salary. Not only that, I got paid a bonus to stay on for the last 3 months. After that was over, I got a job with a competitor company making the exact same salary and doing mostly the same job. Started the very next Monday. I actually even like working for the new company better. I don't know how random that really was, but it sure felt like a real fortunate way to lose a job. I had a boss who was single, no kids, and making around $250K a year. He was set to retire around age 56, and the company begged him to stay on another year, so he did. During that year, the parent company suddenly offered a buyout to eliminate senior positions, offering a month for every year they were there. He had been with the company 30 years, and he walked away with an additional $600K or so. Last I heard, pre-COVID, he was traveling the world in luxury. This is just insanely lucky, though I have to wonder if they knew the deal was coming eventually and did it for his sake. Dunno why they wouldn't have told him though. I briefly worked with a guy who was in his late 20s, ex-military. When he got out, a friend of his he served with told him to buy Bitcoin. He bought several thousand worth when it was nothing and forgot about it. When it first started spiking and getting attention on the news, he started looking for the drive because he thought he had some. He didn't, he had a lot of it. Sold well before the peak. Dude made millions. He had an $800,000 house, multiple high-end cars, and came to work a manual labor job because he was bored. Needless to say, he didn't stay long and all he did was show off his money and clock hours not actually working. I was celebrating my 20th birthday. Decided to go to the nice casino an hour away from campus with my then boyfriend. We played bingo because that's what I could afford, and it occupied some time. We lost. I called my dad, he loves casinos when he has the money to go. He told me to play 3-card poker. I had watched him play before, but I didn't know how, and was on my last $20 to my name. He told me that would be enough for a hand or two and just give it a shot, the dealer would explain the rules. So I sat at the table by myself. I won. The dealer was really excited for me, but I was pretty clueless. I had a straight flush. Then I just kept winning. People would take the seat in front of me, they would lose, I'd win. Didn't matter. Got 2 more straight flushes that night and lots of other good hands. I kept betting the minimum, wish I was putting down more. I turned $20 into $3K that night. My dad didn't believe me. My friend's father was gifted an oil pencil drawing in the late 70s. His family always assumed it was pretty much worthless, and I always joked that it looked like my friend had drawn it as a child. This stilly angry stick figure drawing ended up being an unsigned piece of art by Jane Michelle Basquiat. His family did some digging and eventually had it authenticated by the JMB estate before selling it at Christie's auction house for an amazing sum of money. I was absolutely blown away when I learned this. My friend and his family were far from wealthy, so to realize they had this unknown treasure just sitting out in the living room for so many years was mind-blowing. Having seen Basquiat's known work, even though I'm a fan, I can see how they'd be confused. There's a distinct angry child look to them. I was a male escort for about 7-ish years. Not a hooker, specifically an escort. I would go with people, usually women, but sometimes men, and would pretend to be their perfect boyfriend/partner in front of friends and family or co-workers. It started out very much as an accident, but ended up making me a ton of money. I recently retired and started focusing on going to school cause I can't do escorting my whole life, and nor did I want, because I really dislike people, and it was honestly a chore. Most of my clients were 1% percenters, which is the reason I made so much money. I did pay taxes on it before anyone asks. I quit a job at a startup that was a mess, and I just wanted to do something relaxing, so I took some time of cleaning up an old algorithm I wrote 10 years ago. I told a friend of mine, who told some industry people about it. They contacted me, and I got invited to talk about it at a conference, and then large companies started getting in touch. So far I have signed one 7-figure deal to license it. It's not random, but it feels very random. I'm making more in interest now than I ever have earned holding down a job. The world is not fair. Sounds like your own version of Silicon Valley.